Barrie City Council passed a sweeping drug enforcement motion last week.
I, Mayor Nuttall, introduce the following motion to Council.
The motion covered 6 areas. First, it asked Barrie Police to adopt zero tolerance enforcement against drug use in the city. Second, it called on the federal government to expand mandatory rehabilitation, crack down harder on dealers, support drug courts, and shut down illegal mushroom shops. Third, it asked the province to amend the Mental Health Act to allow mandatory rehabilitation, cap the number of dispensaries, and create rehab centers inside provincial prisons. Fourth, it demanded that Simcoe County hand over specialized outreach funding directly to the city of Barrie. Fifth, it directed city staff to begin zoning changes to shut down illegal storefronts with stiffer financial penalties for those who don't comply. And sixth, it made the encampment response team permanent, adding 5 full-time city positions. But how the motion got to the table is just as notable as what's in it. Mayor Alex Nuttall introduced it as a direct motion invoking Section 284.1 of the Municipal Act, a procedural tool that allows a mayor to bring a matter straight to the council without it first going through committee. That means no staff report, no advance public deputation period, and as Nuttall himself acknowledged, councillors can speak only once, not twice as they normally can.
Without police, prosecution, judges, federal and provincial governments and county governments taking this situation seriously as we are, we will continue to have citizens living in addictions on our streets. That's the fact. That's the truth.
Most councillors expressed their support for the motion. Some had reservations but ultimately voted in its favor.
If they are arrested and they're in jail, and that is one of the best parts of the motion, incarceration is to lead to incarcerate, rehabilitate, and then release back into society and hopefully function. So if keeping people alive is, something the safe consumption did, well, incarceration will do the same.
I am willing to try anything at this point. I am open to any solutions that people have. I think it's very easy to criticize, but until you're sort of sitting in these seats or operating a business or downtown every day, criticism only goes so far. I think we're beyond that, and I think we're solution focused at this point.
It's gut-wrenching to see our city decay, and I'll use the word decay very purposely, in some of the visible social issues the way it has. But what's more mind-numbing is the fact that we sometimes, and this is the collective, we not council, sometimes we seem to spend more time walking on eggshells about the possibility of maybe offending some people or some feelings instead of taking the necessary actions that we have to take.
And only 2 councillors expressed their opposition and voted against the motion.
I won't be voting in favor. I do and I will continue to struggle with, I think when we talk about mandatory rehab, I understand the context of how this is being presented forward. I always think it's wonderful about creating intersections within the system wherever somebody's at to be able to access and get help. But all in all, I still look at this, for me, through more of a lens around addiction being a disease. And
there's not a single study that I could find online that said that mandatory drug rehabilitation was successful in any way. Very, actually, it's a lot of the studies show the harm in it. And plus, with the zero tolerance with our police, we already know that court systems are overwhelmed and our prisons are overcrowded. If we put the kind of funding that we're talking about into pre-care and social services in the beginning, I don't think we'd be having this conversation now.
Critics of the direct motion process have long argued it shortchanges residents who want to weigh in before a vote. Supporters of the direct motion say it's a necessary tool when the issue is urgent. But the mayor did not disclose what the urgency was, particularly given that 2 months earlier, Nuttall had been in Alberta praising the province's mandatory rehab model and meeting with his Minister for Mental Health and Addictions. From the council deliberations, it appeared some councillor had advanced knowledge of the motion, yet residents had no opportunity to provide their feedback before it was approved.
I did have the opportunity to have a great conversation with you in context behind this.
And in the public gallery, some residents applauded and cheered in support of the motion. Notably, in the past, City Clerk Wendy Cook had called security and police against protesters who held silent opposition signs. This time, no such action was taken. At the end, the motion passed 7-2 with councillors Anne Marie Kungal and Amy Koser voting against, while Councillor Jim Harris was absent.
Motion carries.
Here is what happened inside the chamber.
All right, we're into direct motions, and thank you for giving me a moment just to get situated there. In accordance with Section 284.1 of the Municipal Act, I, Mayor Nuttall, introduce the following motion to Council. 1, that correspondence be sent to the Barrie Police Services Board advising of the City of Barrie's support of zero tolerance enforcement of drug laws within the City of Barrie for individuals using drugs, with a request for a response to how the City of Barrie can support this measure. 2, the correspondence be sent on behalf of the City of Barrie to the federal government requesting that A, it expand the use of diversion programs for non-violent and non-trafficking addictions charges, including mandatory rehabilitation. B, strengthen sentences for those who have been charged and refused care. C, support prosecution efforts targeting all drug-related crimes for dealing, using, and abusing drugs in our community. D, support courts in providing effective sentencing for drug users into rehabilitation programs. E, seek sentencing outcomes that impose strong penalties for all drug dealers. F, support the removal of all mushroom shops in Barrie, which are illegal. And G, support the creation of rehabilitation centers in federal correctional institutions. 3, that correspondence be sent on behalf of the City of Barrie to the provincial government requesting that it A, amend the Mental Health Act to allow mandatory rehabilitation or compassionate intervention as it's known. B, invest in mental health and rehabilitation institutions to facilitate the changes to the Mental Health Act. C, strengthen provincial enforcement and coordination to close unlicensed marijuana dispensaries, as well as capping the number of stores permitted with a per capita ratio. D, the provincial government create rehabilitation centers in prisons. E, appeal to the province of Ontario to allow for minimum distance separations between pharmacies and methadone clinics or operations, and operations be transferred to health authorities. 4, that correspondence be sent on behalf of the City of Barrie to the County of Simcoe requesting immediate transfer of specialized outreach funding and responsibility from the County of Simcoe to the City of Barrie. 5, that in order to address illegal retail storefronts and prevent similar establishments in the future, staff be directed to prepare and provide notice as required under the Planning Act of the City's intention to amend the zoning bylaw to disqualify illegal uses where retail is permitted, and that notice be provided to affected property owners and occupants in accordance with the Planning Act, with a public meeting and presentation of the proposed amending bylaw to City Council immediately following the 21-day notice period, and that the fee structure related to zoning bylaw infractions be updated to ensure penalties are sufficient to encourage compliance and cost recovery. 6, that as a result of the continued success of the encampment response established under the emergency order, that effective immediately, the following 5 positions be added to the City's permanent full-time complement. A, Program Manager, Social Services Oversight and Strategy. B, Encampment Response Team Lead. C, Encampment Response Officers ×3. I circulated comments earlier, and I'm going to wait to hold. I'm going to hold mine back to the end because at council, as we all know, we can't speak more than once. So what I'm going to do is actually open the floor to comments right away from members of council, and once each person who's spoken, who would like to speak, has spoken, I will then chime in with my own. So. Would anyone like to lead it off here? Councillor Nixon?
Yeah, thank you, Mayor Nuttall. I think it's maybe a bit of an understatement to say these are extremely bold initiatives, but that is nothing new for this council. There have obviously been many things done in the past that have been within our powers, and some of these initiatives will remain in our powers, and we can make those changes. But as mentioned, in order for the entire body of initiatives to succeed, we're going to need a lot of support from both provincial and federal governments. That's not always easy, but I just want to say that that if there's anyone that can get that support, you and the other big city mayors who I'm sure are on board that would love to see something like this happen in their cities as well. And I'm confident that if anybody can get it done, you can. So that's all I had to say, and thank you for bringing it forward.
Sorry. Questions or comments, Councillor Kunkel?
Thank you, Mayor Nuttall. I won't speak at length, but I think it's important for me to speak because I won't be voting in favor. I did have the opportunity to have a great conversation with you, and context behind this, I think for me is always better because it's a complex situation. This is a multi-pronged aspect that you're presenting. I'm aware of where you and the city of Barrie has been sought out to understand things that have worked well here. So when I'm voting against this, it's not like a blanket approach to say I don't believe in any aspect of this, but there are things within it that I just, at this point in time, it'll be interesting to see if this is supported and where it goes and where this whole conversation goes, knowing that in Ontario, we do have a mental health and addiction system that's really trying to build centers of excellence. There's a lot of groundwork, but we don't yet have a system, right, that is, supporting individuals in all steps of the way, especially on some of the upstream being identification that's early in substance use support and treatment tied to some of our best practice guidelines. So all that to say is I do and I will continue to struggle with, I think when we talk about mandatory rehab, I understand the context of how this is being presented forward. I always think it's wonderful about creating intersections within the system wherever somebody's at to be able to access and get help. I'm not opposed to addressing concerns with, what we're seeing with some of the storefront issues, and knowing that that has been difficult for policing around concerns with some of the shops and access to some of the movement of drugs. But all in all, I still look at this, for me, through more of a lens around addiction being a disease, and however we look at effective and ethical treatment, building on that stronger system. And we've seen wonderful gains around the Heart Hub, which is just, I think, getting a great foothold, getting a lot of attention, and bringing in other resources in the city. So it's not one solution, but there are aspects of this that, because of how it is embedded, I am not supporting the motion as a whole.
Thank you, Councillor. I have Councillor Harvey, then Councillor Hamilton, then Councillor Morales.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor Nuttall, and thank you for bringing this forward. Obviously, not everybody's going to agree with it, but I think some of the other announcements that you've done that are very much aligned with this particular motion has definitely seen the vast majority of our residents supportive of the direction that we are going. And the reason I say that too is when you compare this council to the last council, we're in a very different picture, and we're also voting on things in a very different direction. And we actually saw the problem become worse opposed to better. And you can't keep doing the same thing over and over and expecting a different outcome. Whereas as soon as you made your first announcement with respect to the encampments, not overnight, but slowly but surely, we saw a positive outcome moving forward throughout the city. Predominantly, it's the downtown core that seems to be impacted at a much greater level than anywhere else. But this is just one other step. And when you consider even the county whose responsibility it is to deal with these social services, we have become much more aligned and in the same direction, working hand in hand, opposed to what it was in previous years and last term. And when you look at not only the Heart Hub that Councillor Kunkel mentioned, we've also got the Tiffin Street location that just recently opened up. Rose Street is under construction. these are all pieces of the puzzle that are moving in the direction to be able to assist those, to be able to break the unfortunate habits that they've gotten into, and hopefully help them become more involved citizens and become someone that is going to do some good for themselves and their city. And I think another initiative that really had a great impact to that was the jail shuttle service, opposed to having people dropped off in a foreign city that they didn't know anybody in with a small Presto card and then basically left for them to fend for themselves. Was an unfortunate situation that they were being placed in. And that's where I think we made the right decision in moving forward with that, to be able to provide that extra service that wasn't being provided to them, to be able to reunite them with their friends, family, people that are going to be around them to support them, to be able to move forward in a better direction in society. So I definitely do support this, and I like some of the other pieces that are in this, especially highlighting the mushroom shops, because that is a problem. As fast as the police close one down, it seems like within days they're either opening up at the same location or a different location, and in the end, it's an illegal operation no matter which way you look at it. And then even when you look at the volume of marijuana dispensaries that we have here in the city, to kind of put some context to it, because a lot of people probably wouldn't know, I actually kind of thought, how many do we actually have right now? Because I know it seems like coffee shops, every corner you go to now, they're there. And I'm not quite sure how they're all financially viable with as many as we have. Well, it turns out there's 29 of them. 29 dispensaries for 165,000 people. It seems a little disproportionate. And that's why I hope, pardon me? Yeah, 29 licensed. And the other piece of that is many of those license holders actually have approved licenses that they haven't even used yet, as typically they were being licensed 10 at a time, but only using 1 or 2 when they first began to open. So that just really opens the door for an umpteen number to potentially move forward, not only here in the city, but just across the province. And that's where I think they need to revisit the amount that is proportionate to the populations in the area. Because I don't know about you, but I don't want to see a dispensary at every corner I pull up to. So I'll leave my words at that. I think this is definitely a good direction, and it's kind of aligned with all the other decisions that we've made in the last few years that has made a very positive change in the city. There's still a boatload of work to be done, but this is just one more step in hopefully getting the city back to the way it was 20 years ago when I moved here, because I know it's definitely changed in the 26 years that I've lived here.
I have Councillor Hamilton and then Councillor Morales, followed by Councillor Corser and then Councillor Rietma online, then Councillor Negussi.
Thank you, and through you, Mayor Nuttall. I was actually hoping you would start with your comments, because I think the context of how we got here and how this sort of motion was brought forward is a really important one, because I think there's been a lot of work that has gone into the downtown over the past few months and even since we've taken office here. And I think that storytelling is important. So I'll leave that to you, but some of my questions and narrative were around that. But I want to say, operating a business downtown the past year has given me a new lens of the realities that downtown businesses are facing. And I think it's very easy to sit around this table sometimes and think, oh, we're doing A, B, and C, but the impact is not necessarily being felt downtown. And so I know we've had a lot of conversations about the realities that we're facing, and sometimes the changes that we're imposing aren't necessarily having the impact that we're hoping. But I think all of the things that we've done to date, and I know you're going to go through them. I mean, the Heart Hub, the street outreach, the street cleaning, the dedicated constables, the encampment removals, prisoner drop-off. I mean, we have done so many things. So for people who are watching, who are looking and saying, our downtown is awful, what is City Council doing? We're trying. And if there was an easy solution, this problem would not be encroaching so many municipalities the way it is right now. And to Councillor Kungal's point, you're right, this is very complex, right? And the solutions are very complex, and this is why it's not easy. So I believe what's in front of us today is what is needed. I think elevating the conversation provincially and federally is needed, and I'm glad that we're taking this leap, and I know it's going to be met with some resistance and some challenges, and do I feel comfortable with everything in front of me? I'm not so sure, but I'm at the point where I don't know what else to do, and I think this is what needs to be done to see the impact that we desire in our downtown. Our downtown is beautiful, and we have amazing businesses. We have the best waterfront view anywhere you can imagine, and yet all we're hearing is this negativity and fear and violence and break-ins and open drug use and disturbances, and it takes away from all the beauty and the potential that we have. So I am willing to try anything at this point. I am open to any solutions that people have. I think it's very easy to criticize, but until you're sort of sitting in these seats or operating a business or downtown every day, criticism only goes so far. I think we're beyond that, and I think we're solution focused at this point. And I think what is in front of us is very clear, an outline of potential solutions. Are we going to get everything right? Probably not, but we're not going to know unless we try. A couple of questions I have is just that have we engaged with the Ontario Big City Mayors Caucus or other municipalities to advocate and align efforts? Because I think, again, if we're talking about provincial advocacy, federal advocacy, little city of Barrie, we can only do so much, and I think there's power in numbers. So that's one question.
I prefer to be the city, the little city that could,
Yeah.
you know, but yeah, the answer to that's yes. A lot of this, I won't say all of it, a lot of this has actually already been adopted, not the exact same verbiage, but the same principles and intents in terms of an entire campaign the Big City Mayors has been placing on stopping the crisis, ending the crisis. There are many, we'll have to go check, I'll get back to you on this, but there's, I believe we're in the thousands, if not tens of thousands of signatures on that campaign to ask the provincial government for funding to focus on rehabilitative services. I think that there's the pieces that we've already done at the Big City Mayors. As you know, I'm the deputy chair of Big City Mayors. I'm the incoming chair of Big City Mayors. In June, which will be, I think it's our final meeting before the election. There is there another one before that?
Sorry, Mayor Nuttall, August, I believe. August,
okay. So the June meeting, we will be looking at all of the, and I'm going to talk a little bit about this later, all of the things that are done in other provinces to meet the day on this emergency, right? And you know, it's interesting, Big City Mayors adopted a position that the province of Ontario should declare an emergency. There's only one city that's declared an emergency, so really it was following what we've already done, right? So the answer to that is yes. That advocacy is focused at the provincial level. There's a separate organization which we don't qualify for because we're not large enough, which I can't even remember the name of it, but let's call it Big City Mayors of Canada, that focuses on the federal side alongside FCM. So I think I answered the question.
Yes, you did, and thank you. And so there's no need or desire to amend this motion to give direction to coordinate with the other big city mayors. That's outside of this.
I would actually I already am taking this there, although they, to be honest, they've had input into this.
Great. Wonderful. Perfect. And then a second question, if I may. Just, and I know I've talked to you about this a little bit, but just has the Barrie Police Services Board been advised on, or we've been advised on how zero tolerance aligns with current policing and the, if this is a practical approach for Barrie Police, and are they comfortable with enforcing a zero tolerance, or do we understand what that means from our perspective and their perspective? Can you just share a little bit about the conversations to date with Barrie Police Force?
Yeah, and I think I got to be a little careful here because I think that it's, you know, as anyone would expect, there'd be confidential conversations happening between the Police Services Board and the executive of the police services. I think that there's a widespread support on the Police Services Board for zero tolerance. I think that there's support in the service for that as well. I think that there is a very complex, like, I'm trying to think how to say this without going into politispeak, okay? Like, just if you can just give me a second. The structure of judicial governance, whether it's the judges, the prosecution office, the public prosecution office of Canada, have immense weight in how the police are on the ground doing their job. If a police officer is told, do not do this, do not enforce this law because by a prosecution, because the public prosecution office has said not to, because the judges have decided it isn't a fit, you know, it becomes more and more difficult for the police to enforce every law as the law is written.
Right.
But I think what we're asking here is zero tolerance from the police on the street. And by the way, the same from the prosecution office, and by the way, the same from the judiciary. And we all believe in the separation of church and state, and don't let politicians get involved with justice.
Mm-hmm.
But at some point, we've also got to say as citizens, like, there's an expectation from our judiciary as to what should happen when somebody breaks the law. And we're not asking in this motion to throw away the key. We're actually asking for diversion programs to treat the core problem, which is either the mental health / the addiction issue. And let's focus on that.
Mm-hmm.
But it needs to be something similar to what Portugal did, where they put these mandatory sentences into rehabilitation in place. And if somebody doesn't want the rehabilitation and they want the jail instead, that's on them, not on us.
Okay, thank you. And then just a last comment I'll say is I hope in the interim, before there's any provincial change or diversion programs, that there's a level of coordination between Barrie Police and County of Simcoe Outreach, or if now we're getting the funding and doing that level of outreach. I think right now there's a disconnect, and this is just my experience downtown, but between those two forces. And I think there can be a lot more coordination, because at the end of the day, I mean, this is really about mental health and addiction challenges. And I don't necessarily think more policing is going to help that in the long run. I really do think we need the appropriate services. So just to plug at some point, and I don't think it needs to go into the motion, but I think how we implement this is going to be really, really important. And it needs to be done in partnership with the right entities, including Barrie Police, but also being mindful of the outreach and mental health and addiction supports that are needed.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Hamilton. Appreciate it. Councillor Morales.
Councillor Hamilton going first got me writing notes, which is never a good thing. Mayor Nuttall, it's gut-wrenching to see our city decay, and I'll use the word decay very purposely, in some of the visible social issues the way it has. But what's more mind-numbing is the fact that we sometimes, and this is the collective we, not council, sometimes we seem to spend more time walking on eggshells about the possibility of maybe offending some people or some feelings, instead of taking the necessary actions that we have to take. Do you remember the pushback that we got in June 2023? There was a lot of work that went into the panhandling ban proposal with some other services. And we spent the entire month of June putting up fires, having this chamber, which is the public's right, obviously, too, on walking the technicality of that back. I don't think there's people that disagreed about the issue of having just panhandlers on highway ramps, by the way, but anywhere. There's some on Lakeshore, some on Bayfield, and we ended up having to walk it back. There was big claps, there was a celebration, some victory. You know what it is now? The panhandlers in Barrie are known in the GTA to be organized. They get dropped off, they get picked up. So the average person does the panhandling. Not every single person is part of a greater system. Barrie Fire does a great job at the boot drive, but you guys have yourself beat when it comes to this. Why am I bringing this up? We had put in the work, and I think that, again, it's frustrating and mind-numbing for me that we sometimes spend more time walking on the eggshells instead of taking the necessary actions we have to take. As Councillor Hamilton said, we're not going to get everything right, but we have to keep going on something. Some of the best comments I've gotten from either Ward 9 residents or people outside living in Barrie was compliments about the boldness, and I'll say it politely, that we had, that you had, when we declared that state of emergency in the fall. People from the GTHA reaching out to me saying, wow, that took some guts. And again, I'm saying that politely. We need to implement policy. We need support systems. We need them resourced. But personally speaking, we need consequences back. I'm not that old to the point where I remember consequences were part of the fabric of society. That's the reason my parents immigrated to this country when I was 7 years old. That's the reason they came specifically to Barrie when I was 9. No disrespect to the GTA, but they said, we like that small town, big city, you know what I mean, small city, big town mentality of accountability that Barrie has to offer. And to point to Councillor Harvey's point, it seems like we're doing more work on this council to address the issues, but there's just more bad, that it's somehow getting worse, yet we're doing better. And we need to get out of that. This motion and these initiatives that we've taken are bold, are risky, are uncomfortable, but they're necessary. So I'm going to proudly the vote. We need to stop tiptoeing on the eggshells. And I haven't heard the words involuntary treatment in a while. I hope they keep buzzing at AMO, and I hope that they keep moving forward. And I hope that the legislative offices at the provincial levels and federal figure it out, because residents are, not just in Barrie, but we are frustrated, and we need to return to kind of the normalcy that, again, not just my personal family experience, but a lot of people that have invested decades, not just money, but their families have invested in this city and in other cities, because we need to kind of see that decency again.
Thank you, Councillor Morales. I have Councillor Rietman, then was it Corser, then Rietman? Councillor Corser, then Councillor Rietman.
Thank you. I was a little surprised when I saw this motion come through. There's several things I agree on, like mushroom shops, etc., that we don't need to be having in our community, and illegal drugstores of any kind that should not be in our community. But I do have, besides just the human rights side of things and all those things, let's just take that off the table for a moment. But before council takes a formal position supporting mandatory rehabilitation, I think we need to understand whether this is evidence-based and whether the treatment system actually has the capacity to support it. There's not a single study that I could find online that said that mandatory drug rehabilitation was successful in any way. Very, actually, it's a lot of the studies show the harm in it. And plus, with the zero tolerance with our police, we already know that court systems are overwhelmed and our prisons are overcrowded. And people that have done heinous crimes sit and wait for months and months and months on end until they can come forward. Sometimes they get off because they are kept without seeing a court date for a long period of time. So if we go ahead and start taking zero tolerance towards somebody smoking a pipe, then we are going to have a whole lot of more impact on our judicial system and our prisons eventually. If we put the kind of funding that we're talking about into pre-care and social services in the beginning, I don't think we'd be having this conversation now. And it just seems to me that it's putting like the horses are already out of the barn, and now we have to start looking at how to do it in a social and respectful way. There's no evidence that backs this, and I can't support something that does not that the evidence is the exact opposite of it being useful or that it's successful in any way. So it doesn't make sense to support this, and I won't be.
Thank you, Councillor Corser. I now have Councillor Rietman.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think that if there was an easy answer to this problem, we'd have found it long ago. And I agree that the situation is complex and the answers are going to be complex. I think also when you look at what we've done here in the city of Barrie since the emergency declaration, I think we've come some distance. Things have improved. And the difficulty is that we cannot do it ourselves. And that's why I'm going to support this resolution, not because I agree with everything in it, but because I think it's important to get the conversation going, particularly at the provincial and the federal level. I certainly agree that we will never arrest our way out of this situation. We need much better tools than what we have now. I think we need to address the upstream problems. What are the causes of drug addiction and mental health issues that we're seeing today? Because I agree, I think we need to try to resolve those so that we prevent the situation that we're in today. But we are where we are, and we certainly can't do it ourselves. And I think that writing to the provincial and the federal governments, sometimes you wonder whether it's worth the postage, but I think it'll start to get the situation going, the discussion going. I certainly question as well mandated rehabilitation. I'm not sure that I think the jury is still out whether that works or doesn't work, whether it's the right thing to do. But let's have a conversation about it. I certainly support rehabilitation in prisons. We call our prison system a corrections facility, and yet there's not much correction going on, and I think those kind of things, the rehabilitation piece is really important. Just a couple of other comments. I won't address every one of them, but I'm a little surprised that the zoning bylaw does not clearly state that illegal activities are not permitted. And I certainly would encourage any changes that we can make to do that. And upping the fees, absolutely. We just don't want our fees to be just a cost of doing business. I think as well, I'm concerned about methadone clinics, and I'm glad that we address that. I think that there is a good case to be made to separate them from pharmacies. I think that methadone clinics are very useful, have proven to be useful, and I think they should be run by a healthcare facility rather than have them in the private sector. I would like to see them as part of our Heart Hub or part of RVH or some other health facility. Those are my comments, Mr. Mayor. I have some reluctance on some of the wording of it, but I think we're going in the right direction, and so I will be supporting. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor. And I have Councillor Negussi.
Thank you, Mayor Nuttall. I support this motion because it sends a clear message that Barrie is taking action to keep our community safe while addressing addiction with accountability and care. This is, I think, the balanced approach that combines strong enforcement with, real pathway to rehabilitation. And the other thing is, it also calls on the federal and provincial partner to do their part, because we as municipalities cannot tackle this challenge alone. And this is about protecting our neighborhoods, protecting those in need, and delivering the leadership our community expects. So I support this motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Negussi. Deputy Mayor Thompson.
Thank you, Mayor Nuttall, and thank you for this. I know the amount of work that's went into this, and it is a complex issue, and it's only getting worse. I think of when I first got to council and the direction we were taking, and we filled this gallery with discussion on a safe consumption site, and a lot of the talk around the safe consumption site was, we don't have the treatment, we don't have a lot of the services, the wraparounds, and the intentions were to keep people alive, to get them treatment. And I find that a lot of people, it's an either or, but it's not. So like with the safe consumption sites, yes, it was I believe it prolongs people's lives. It doesn't save them because there's no treatment, and the use of an illicit drug at the levels. Eventually, we look at our numbers of overdoses. So if it leads to incarceration because of lawless behavior, like we're not arresting them for consuming just any product. We're arresting them for consuming an illegal product. They're performing illegal acts. It's not based on anything other than breaking the criminal code. So if they are arrested and they're in jail, and that is one of the best parts of the motion, incarceration is to lead to incarcerate, rehabilitate, and then release back into society and hopefully function. So if keeping people alive is something the safe consumption, well, incarceration will do the same. And I know that sounds harsh, but it's the longer we worry about people and the continuation of using drugs. You take women, like by condoning the use of drugs, women are trafficked because of their addiction. So I'm not into that, and I'm not supporting that we continue this behavior. And you look at facts. Last year, or from January to September, there was almost 4,200 deaths in Canada. So it was actually 4,162. 1,800 were in BC. You look at the services and the behaviors and the ideology in BC, they have everything. Numerous safe consumption sites, vending machines for harm reduction, safe supply. But it's the mecca of our overdoses. So what's actually gotten to this point is the ideology, the it's okay, the normalization, you walk around and, we hear things like businesses opening. First, they got to clean human feces. Then they got to move people along. They got to, there's no accountability. And I know it's harsh, and it's like, we're always terrified to do something because we might offend somebody. And we're worried about charters of rights, and that is extremely important. But we forgot the charter of rights of people who law-abiding citizens. Like, we're so worried about the lawlessness. Like, I think of the meeting we had, with staff and police and everything, and we're always looking at doing what's right and what's legal and all that, and we're up against people that don't think like that, and it makes it very difficult for us. So I am 100% supporting this motion. Yes, there's parts, but it's all about the support of everybody else. As Councillor Hamilton mentioned, we can't do this alone. Like, the police need to buy in, the county needs to buy in, the BIA needs to buy in, the residents. It's a whole, we're in this together kind of attitude. And look, and I understand the councils that don't support this because of, an ideology, what they believe is right and wrong. And I understand that. And, I don't look negative upon anybody because of their feelings and their opinions, but I just look at our ideologies, and this is why we're here. Like, we've went down such a road that normalized this behavior, and we encouraged it in Barrie. And I hate to admit that, but we did everything to make Barrie the best place to be homeless. And and I'm not saying homeless is a great thing, but we made it very easy here. And we've done a lot. We've supported networks, we've supported organizations and affordable housing, supportive housing, transition housing. We've done it all. And I just don't think the results are there. And now I think it's time to be a lot harsher and in a direction. And I know that doesn't sit well with people, but I talk to more people that, they talk ill of our downtown, and it's unfair because our downtown's beautiful and it's a perception. But there are some issues there, but they're nowhere close to what people are saying. And I believe it's time that we show people that our downtown is somewhere that is alive and thriving, and you have nothing to worry about going down there. And I think this motion helps. So thank you for that.
So just ask, please don't clap in the chambers, folks. And it doesn't matter if you're supporting or not supporting things that, you know, I believe in or whatever. Just please don't, because it's part of the rules of the chambers. I have prepared some remarks for tonight, and then I've got some other remarks based on some of the conversation around the table. I'm going to be completely honest with the council. This is going to be a long one. I've sent this around to members, and I think it deserves the time. There's not very many venues we get to just really wring out the issues, see what comes out, and then have an effect. And there's also not many issues that have the complexity, as people have been talking about, of this one. And it's multi-level. So I'll read my remarks, and then I want to talk about what mandatory intervention does and doesn't do, and what's worked and hasn't worked. So I'm going to ask members of the public and council to think for a second about these words. When we took office, prisoners from around Ontario were released to downtown Barrie. Didn't matter where you're from. If you served time in Penetang, you were dropped off at our bus station. Homelessness was rampant. Encampments were sanctioned. Entire hotels were rented out for increasing homeless population. There was no plan for affordable housing. It was a catchphrase, not an option. There was no plan for rehabilitation. The YMCA was without a home. Even their project included a home for 12 youth experiencing homelessness. Housing costs, as we know, were skyrocketing. Defund the police wasn't yelled through megaphones by protesters. It was promoted around this council table. A drug injection site was approved by the city and imminent in Barrie's downtown. Whatever strategy there was, it was focused on the day it was being discussed rather than a long-term strategy to create positive change. If you wonder how we got here over the last 6 years or 16 years, it's pretty simple. We've had leaders in the Western world and our governments that have advocated for leniency on drugs. They've fought any scrutiny on drug users or stigmatization. And the deputy mayor will remind me there is stigmatization of one drug, and that's tobacco. And the number of people using tobacco is falling. These leaders encouraged legalized drug sites and rejected calls for rehabilitation. I have my entire career called for rehab, enforcing the law, providing long-term help for those in addictions, and published a paper on it in 2018. I wrote 17, but it's in front of me now, this paper, and it says 18, so I was wrong. When you fast forward 3.5 years into this term, this is what's changed. The prisoner drop-off is being stopped thanks to Barrie City Council. Homelessness is still a major issue. Encampments are gone except for along provincial lands, which are waiting for the MTO to remove them. The hotels, which resulted in massive crime increases in each of these areas, are no longer rented. Over the 4 years, we have seen the beginning of construction of 779 affordable housing units, with roughly half thanks to this council's decision on development charges. The county, another 155. We have requests coming in for another 380 affordable housing units that we haven't even contemplated as a city council yet. Our plan's working. Instead of defunding the police, we funded the police. And we do so confidently with the expectation of strong enforcement. A drug injection site was stopped. Instead, we have a heart hub. We have a rehabilitation center where people can start to get better and realize the potential in their lives instead of the hell of addiction. It is run from a medical lens by the Royal Victoria Health Centre and their partners. It is working with incredible results, responsible for 50% of the people who have gone through the 29 heart hubs. Our one heart hub is responsible for 50% of the people who have graduated into stability in their lives and into supportive housing. It's incredibly successful locally. In this same time period, the County of Simcoe, with support from the province and the Government of Canada, has made huge investments. Additional rooms and beds over Blake Street, expansion of the shelter units at Tiffin Street, oversight and standing up of the entire Heart Hub. To be fair to the County of Simcoe, there is a massive work being done, especially with regards to our direct requests. There's work being done to deliver a new centre with partnership between the aforementioned Heart Hub team and including private fundraising. This is a work in progress, but one, when fully negotiated and realized, will provide necessary support to individuals choosing help. But we have to identify that there are still issues. While the encampments continue to be removed, those afflicted with addiction are impacting those around them in very, very serious ways. Some of those ways are not illegal, but some are. Either way, there is definitely an impact. And I want to outline the concerns I hear, and maybe this is not all of them, but it's many of them for sure. There isn't consistent enforcement of our drug laws in Barrie. No one is trying to move people on the street into rehabilitation or get them help. If people can open up illegal drug shops, of course there's going to be worse behavior on the streets in front of them. How does an illegal drug shop even exist? To Councillor Rietma's point. Every morning there's garbage left by somebody sleeping in my doorway or behind my store. How can someone be doing a fold in the middle of the street due to drugs and not be taken to care immediately? I've watched drug deals happen repeatedly. I've been harassed or threatened. These are not issues unique to Barrie. In fact, this will shock some people in the audience here. But I've mayors from around the province come to see what it is that's happening here in the city of Barrie, as I have done in other communities. The sad part is that in many ways we're actually doing far better than the others. When I look at the list of complaints coming in, there are few that the city have power to change. The ones that we do have the power through working with legal and zoning experts, I believe we have a path on removing illegal dispensaries. And this motion begins to process that tonight. Enforcement is not a thing that Barrie City Council can determine. It is an arm's length decision of the executive team at the Barrie Police Service. I can tell you that I've had many conversations along with our police board and the executive team on how to proceed forward with zero tolerance. This motion endorses that zero tolerance position on the streets of our city for drug use and illegal activities, including drug dealing. It kind of feels like it shouldn't need to be said, but in this day and age, it does. We need specialized outreach services to move individuals into care in Barrie. We do not have this, and quite frankly, we do not have the outreach services that are consistently working outside of their buildings. I'm told regular outreach does not do that type of outreach anymore, and so we need specialized outreach. I've been working with the County of Simcoe to secure new specialized outreach services that hopefully move people into care so we don't have to wait for policing to crack down on illegality. I think this is the right approach to take a medical issue or to make it a medical issue prior to being a crime being committed. With regards to illegal drug dealing storefronts downtown, any rent they pay is paid by money received through drug dealing activities. If someone is illegally selling weed or mushrooms, how much of a stretch is it that there are other illicit activities, other drugs? If there are no connections to organized crime, and I have been astonished with some of the responses to cracking down on illegal mushroom dispensaries and marijuana dispensaries, and I want people to hear this. If there are no connections between those dispensaries and organized crime, why are there fire bombings and vehicles being driven through the storefronts? It's not happening at other stores. Why? Because they don't have connections to organized crimes and they're not dealing drugs. But we are going to shut you down. Every illegal dispensary. I believe that those who are receiving rent checks are buying buildings, they're paying bills, they're owning cars, they're enjoying a lifestyle off of criminal market money. You're living off proceeds of crime. It's not a gray area, it's just black and white. You take money from drug dealers and you use it to add to your own wealth. And you do so knowingly. The ones that I believe that I'm speaking to right now, and I say I believe because there's not a website you can go to where people have registered as illegal drug dealers, Our number one Dunlop Street East, owned by 2616209 Ontario Inc., has Blaze District, Shroomies Magic Mushroom Dispensary, and Fungi's Magic Mushroom Dispensary. Bob, and others, Steve, in the media, I can't tell you who 2616209 Ontario Inc. is, but once upon a time, the media will be able to find out. 284 Dunlop Street East, owned by 1369349 Ontario Inc. This is the Mohawk Smoke. 399 Dunlop Street East, owned by Walter Daniel Pazuk, and this has Cush City operating here. Should be noticed at one point this Cush City actually had a license from the province and appears that it does no longer. Number 4, the owner of the company is 10014422714 Ontario Inc. Purchased in 2025. It's located at 129 Dunlop Street East, and Fungi's is in this building. These are examples of buildings that the City of Barrie needs to focus on with changes to the zoning bylaw, and they cannot be grandfathered. They need to be shut down, and our letters identifying this will go out as fast as we can pass the changes to the zoning bylaw. Now, over a year ago, the Barrie Police Service arrested and confiscated the effects of mushroom dispensaries downtown. Arrests were made, charges were laid, but penalties were not paid. The police did what they do. They enforced the law, Canadian drug laws. The prosecution approved the charges. The judgments were no penalties. This is not just a case for mushroom stores. The enforcement of drug laws on our streets are discouraged in many aspects by the Public Prosecution Office in Canada. The result is the Crown prosecutors are less likely to pursue charges, and judges are even less likely to give any penalty, even to illegal drug dealers like those outlined above. And remember, these are the same people who have their establishments hit with firebombs and cars going through front walls and windows. This motion appeals to and supports the judges of this land enforcing the laws of this land. It appeals to and supports the prosecution office, prosecuting those who are found using and selling drugs. And it appeals to support the police department enforcing all of our drug laws in our streets. But it does so with a careful and a caring approach. We're also calling for full-scale rehab options in jails to help reform and heal those serving time. They're doing this in Alberta. If there's an option for somebody to get their addiction under control and to find a new path and a new way, we want them to find that option. We're calling for diversion programs when someone is arrested and charged to provide a medical approach to getting better rather than to throw away the key approach for addictions. And I don't know when society started believing that you couldn't have these two things at the same time. But there can be a zero-tolerance approach on our streets that helps individuals right their lives rather than throw the key away and destroy it. We can have safe, secure streets and be caring for people who are living in addictions. In fact, I don't find it caring whatsoever to see someone taking fentanyl, standing, then bending over in the middle of our street, and no one doing anything about it. I have a description for that. I actually find it careless, I find it cruel, and I find it lazy. Cue the specialized outreach. Cue the enforcement. But there is a thing that I believe is needed more than anything. BC, Alberta, Saskatchewan, and Manitoba are either moving forward with or have amended their laws and policies under mental health to instill varying times of compassionate intervention, i.e. mandatory rehabilitation. If the rehab centers are not built, both inside and outside of our penal system, and the necessary changes to the Mental Health Act are made, we will never help those who need help on the streets, and we will never feel the safety and security that every one of us wants. The motion formally requests the province to move forward with the necessary policy changes and the necessary funding to fulfill those policy changes to the Mental Health Act. Another change we need to see is with regards to pharmacies or methadone clinics operating side by side of each other. I want everyone to think about McDonald's in downtown, the same McDonald's I take my kids to. If I'm standing at McDonald's and I decide to go east, I have to walk past a methadone clinic. So I'm not going to do that with my kids. So then I'm going to go west. You know what happens when I go west? I cross Toronto Street. You know what's there? A methadone clinic. So I'm like, no, I don't want to do that. I want to go across the street to be able to get away from it. And guess what I run into? A methadone clinic. There has to be a separation distance between these services. I am not a doctor. I do not know if methadone works or doesn't work. I do not want to get into the question of whether it's the right approach or wrong approach. I have people come to me and tell me it is the right approach for them and they've been successful using it. And I have people come to me and say it was the wrong approach for them. What I do know is you can't put all of these services in one place and expect to have anything but the patients who need those services to be there. It's just common sense. But right now, we are unable to enforce a law that provides for minimum distance separations. We're not allowed to restrict any of those uses, and it requires a provincial change. Without police, prosecution, judges, federal and provincial governments and county governments taking this situation seriously as we are, we will continue to have citizens living in addictions on our streets. That's the fact. That's the truth. We have taken huge strides and actions to date, but there's even more to come, and we need everybody to be working together. Now, there's a slightly touchdown. If you're here because of enforcement, okay, and you believe there needs to be more enforcement, under this term of council, we've gone from 218 police officers to 250 police officers. At the same time, we've added 12 new special constables. Just round numbers, let's call it 44, 43. If you divide that into the 218, you'll get about a 20% increase in the number of police officers on our streets. At the same time, our police chief said, I don't want 2 deputies, I want more frontline officers. Right? Putting the focus on how we can have a better impact in the community rather than more white-collared folks sitting in the offices. We got more people out in the street trying to help. I think the culture is there for what we're all trying to achieve. But there's a lot of policy changes that need to come in order for the success to be what the expectation is of our city. And we're saying this, and Belleville's saying this, and Kingston's saying this, and Ottawa's saying this, and Windsor's saying this, and Sudbury, and London, and Guelph, and Kitchener, and Brantford, and Thunder Bay. This is not a Barrie issue. But we can be part of the solution, and that's what we're trying to do here. Maybe 3/4 of things don't work, but we find 2 that do. We're 1 step closer then, 2 steps closer. I want to go back to, and I'm going to then call the vote after this, but I want to go back to the conversation on rehabilitation, on compassionate intervention. There actually is a study, and about 8 years ago, I took a stand and said I don't want an injection site to be put into downtown Barrie. And it doesn't matter what side of that individuals were at. There's a place that's actually had success beating opioid-related deaths and beating opioid-related addiction. And that place is Portugal. In 1997, Portugal was seen to be the capital of drugs in Europe, one of the capitals in the world. And by 2001, they had turned what was basically close to 20% of people under the age of 30 down to 8%, saying that they had experience with drugs. Now, I'm not going to question my colleagues because that wouldn't be fair to them. There's 11 of us, but I have experience with drugs. I've used drugs in my teenage years. Okay, and so I'm guessing we're going to get past 8% because I think we might have just done that. So when we go into what Portugal managed to achieve, getting down to 8%, you've got to say, well, how did they do that? How did they get it down? They opened rehabilitation centers. They focused on prevention. They actually brought the Ministry of Education, all of the police forces, non-governmental organizations, and the IDT, which is their Institute for Drugs and Addiction, and they brought them all together working on one plan. They put prevention units in place across the country made up of social workers and other folks that went into pubs, discos, cultural events, festivals, concerts, where people were likely to use drugs. They created ad campaigns to talk about how bad drugs are and to avoid them. They created preventative measures inside of schools with education programs called safe school programs, where police patrols were done around high-risk school areas. They created a dissuasion commission. Each of the 18 provinces had a dissuasion commission, and 3 people were nominated by the Ministries of Health and Justice, 2 from the Health Ministry and 1 generally a medical professional, a social worker, and the 3rd being a legal expert. And if you got caught with drugs, you had to see the dissuasion commission. It wasn't a choice. If you didn't show up, they created sanctions. Sanctions like you had to basically, there was fines, or you had to do volunteer programs, or you had to go and talk to other people about it and explain to them the bad things about drugs. And they would usually fall short of imprisonment. They would then move to criminal charges the next time. So while there was a removal away from it, they eventually got to criminal charges. They had street teams, kind of like specialized outreach workers that we're asking for. They had street teams that went out. And there's another 15 things that they did, but they're all in line with what we're asking for tonight. One thing that they point to over and over and over again is mandatory rehabilitation for those who can't make the decision for themselves, who are in a position where they've broken the law. Like, I'm not gonna, it's silly for me to point to my own study and say, look, there's a study that says that mandatory rehabilitation works. I did this in concert with the Parliamentary Library of Canada and the executive assistant to the Attorney General of Ontario. And we quoted a bunch of reports that said mandatory rehabilitation worked for Portugal, because that's what worked for Portugal. Doesn't mean it's going to work here, but it worked for Portugal. So I'm going to end at that and call the vote. It's 8:56. We've gone a lot longer. I've gone a lot longer than I had imagined I would. And so, Madam Clerk, I would like to call for a recorded vote, if that's okay, and leave it over to you to do that.
Thank you, Mayor Nuttall. I'm going to start with Councillor Rietma, who is on the screen.
Yes.
Councillor Nixon.
Yes.
Councillor Kungle.
No.
Councillor Corser.
No.
Deputy Mayor Thompson.
Yes.
Councillor Negussi.
Yes.
Councillor Harvey.
Yes.
Councillor Harris. Oh, sorry. Just reading from the paper, not paying attention. Sorry, my apologies. Councillor Morales.
Yes.
Councillor Hamilton.
Yes.
And Mayor Nuttall.
Yes.
Motion carries.
For Simcoe Community Media, I am Deepak Bidwai. This story was supported by the Local Journalism Initiative.